cooperatives is because the schools in this state and this country don't teach us anything about cooperatives. And yet cooperatives are a very common way of people getting together and doing things for themselves that private profit-making corporations either won't do or won't do as satisfactorily. And it's important that the people that work for Basin Electric are familiar with the subject of cooperatives, because you work for not only one, but a whole lot of them. Basin Electric isn't itself a cooperative, but it serves other cooperatives which organized it. And so you really should understand the nature of the organization and the organizations which you work for and serve. A cooperative is not always organized just in order to save money. It operates on a nonprofit basis, and if it's competently operated and properly organized, it should save the members money. But it's often organized in order for the people that organize it to provide themselves with a service that they cannot otherwise get. And this was largely the case with the rural electric cooperatives. As many of you know, the rural areas of this country had no electricity for many, many years. Central station service was initiated in 1884, and the people that lived in the cities had electric service for many, many years before the rural people did. And as of the middle 1930s, 50 years after the beginning of Central Station electric service, most of the people who lived in the rural areas were still without electricity. And this is more important than most of you would realize, because you have always lived with electricity. But try to figure out how it would be to live without it. The farm wife had a washboard instead of a washing machine, and the farmer had to carry water instead of having it piped to the barn. They had no indoor plumbing. Their light at night was terrible. I don't know how many of you have tried to read by a kerosene lamp, but I can tell you it's no pleasure. And so there were all sorts of effects on their quality of life because of the lack of electricity, and also on their productivity. They could not raise the crops that they can now. The power companies didn't serve the rural areas because it was not profitable to do so. And so finally, in order to get service rather than primarily to save money, the farmers got together, and they in every township and county, a handful of them would drive around and collect $5 memberships and persuade their members of this dreamy idea that for a $5 membership they could get electricity. And most of them didn't believe it. In this part of the country, that movement only took hold in the late 1940s. And it was the early 50s, in fact, in some parts of this region, before the rural areas had distribution lines and electricity. So it wasn't all that long ago that electricity came to the farms and the other rural people in this region. Well, when they started what they did, they had no idea of eventually becoming their own wholesale power supplier. But as their cooperatives grew, and as people used a lot more electricity than anyone had anticipated, they found that they needed a source of power. And again, there really wasn't any place for them to turn to get it in this region. And they could have purchased it, but in this case at an exorbitant price. And so they decided to supply it to their own cooperatives, and they organized Basin Electric, which has become a very large operation. But it is still controlled by consumers who, as you know, elect the farmers and ranchers who meet in this room every month and make all of the critical decisions on the policies and the operation of this cooperative. Now, within a few years, Basin Electric will be probably the largest wholesale power supplier in the upper Missouri River Basin. And this is the largest river basin in the United States. So that it is not a minor or negligible element in the power industry in this region, which produces much of the food for this country and the world. I could cite other examples of GTA, Grain Terminal Association, the CEMEX, the Cooperative Oil Organization, credit unions. There are, I don't know how many tens of thousands of credit unions which would be called banks if they were not consumer-owned, there are producer cooperatives through which farmers market their produce, some of them very large indeed. So that cooperatives are a significant element in the economic structure of our society, but they are carefully ignored by our school systems because the profit-making corporations don't want people to know about them. And they're pretty successful in suppressing this kind of information. It's a foolish attitude because the cooperatives, as far as I know, have never been a threat to the profit-making corporations. Well, incidentally, in the state of North Dakota, I believe the Constitution requires that the state universities include courses in cooperatives, but they have, to my knowledge, never done so. And so this is the reason why it's necessary for us to have this short course in cooperatives. It is important to you personally, in addition to knowing what kind of an organization you work for, because there are ways in which you can participate in other types of cooperatives to your own benefit at times. The most immediate example is credit unions, of which there are a number in Bismarck, and through which you can borrow money at lower cost than from a bank, provided that you deposit some of your savings in it. There may be, in years to come, one or more cooperative medical care organizations. My family and I received excellent medical care in the Washington, D.C. area for many years from a cooperative, and it was extremely satisfactory. There are other types of cooperatives available which you might want to look into just for your own, as far as your own personal affairs are concerned. Now, we're really pleased that an institution of higher education in this region, because of the interest of its president, has taken a special interest in cooperatives and is undertaking to fill the educational gap that has existed in this region for so long. And some of the people from that school will be talking to you this morning about the subject of cooperatives.